Warning: the following podcast contains violent scenes that may be unsettling to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Diaries, where the Bold Crew gets together to talk about subjects dealing with our favorite tabletop role-playing games outside of our actual plays. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter, where you'll find our Discord link. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Diaries with our brand new segment, Brianstorming. In it, we will be flexing our creative muscles to put together stories, modules, adventure paths, and inspiration for different games, but with a twist, which we'll get to in a little bit. I'm Becca, your host for Brianstorming, and today my storyteller is Slavek. So Slavek, can you explain some of your storytelling experience for us?
Well, I've actually storytold quite a lot. I've been kind of a forever GM when I was younger, as it's so often called. And I guess I started with it when I was like 14, which is like 10 years ago.
Dang!
And we used to play with my friends at school, usually like during lessons and stuff. We had dice. We were playing Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, the first edition.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic.
So all we needed was a D6 and two D10s. And, well, from our corner of the room, we could always hear the die rolling, usually during math, chemistry, anything and everything.
Oh my goodness, that just brings a whole new level to being distracted during class. Like, clearly you guys understood the material enough in school to be distracted, or maybe you didn't and you just preferred. I mean,
well,
no judgments there.
We made it through school, so it was all right.
Oh, cool. Okay, so in high school you started, gosh, that forever GM thing. Now I just feel like posting like sad memes about that.
Yeah, and for TCVN, I usually had like, it was just fantasy stuff and I guess some 40K, so some sci-fi too. But yeah, the longer I've played, the more I've been attracted to weirder and weirder systems. And well, I've always been looking for alternatives to like mainstream games like 5e and stuff.
So is that something that you just like Googled, or because I've never heard of 13th Age until you specifically brought it up with us?
I think how I found it, I'm not sure because it's some time ago, is I was browsing the internet shop of a local Czech gaming store, and they had lots of stuff there, and I think it might have been around the time that V5 was announced. So I was checking all the different RPGs, and they actually had like pre-orders for the deluxe edition or whatever, but afterwards I just said screw it, and good thing that I did. And I was like, fantasy. Okay, so there's like Pathfinder, there's 5e. And what's this game, right? 13th Age. So I Googled it, took a look. Okay, so it's supposed to be like taking the best parts of 3rd edition and the best parts of 4th edition with like the writers from both actually being present.
Oh, okay.
So it's like, okay, that sounds interesting. So I ordered it and I was like, wow, this is really great. And by that point, I already had experience with 5e. And I guess I just wanted something different.
Yeah.
5e is very limiting once you...
I love running 5e simply because of how simple it is and explaining it to new people. It's a lot better. Like I recently just started a Pathfinder 1st edition game with a group of women who have never played before. And I think it was the worst choice that I could have made. I should have just been like, okay, let's play 5th Ed. Like swallowed my pride on that one.
You should have played 13th Age.
I mean, there's that too.
No, actually, 13th Age is super easy to run, in my opinion. Like, when it comes to monster stat blocks, I feel like it blows 5e out of the water because it's very simple. It's not like they don't have player spells.
Okay.
But usually the stat block fits. It's pretty small usually.
Okay.
Usually you just have the stats and maybe 2 or 3 abilities. Less if it's just like a normal mook.
Yeah. Okay. So I feel like, well, we can totally dive into more
Yeah.
13th Age, which, spoilers, that's the system that we're talking about today. I'm just so intrigued by it that I apparently wanted to skip some steps. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you've been the forever GM for like the last 10 years. And
Yeah, I guess that was one of the reasons I joined TCBN too.
that's right. Because you're one of the first people who started playing in the games. I often
Yeah.
forget about that.
It was a wild ride.
It has been. It's crazy to think that it's been going on for about 5 years now. Almost.
Yeah, actually almost 5 years. That is
Yeah.
crazy.
I know. That's weird. So for this round of Brianstorming, like with Tillman and with Quinn, each storyteller participating was given the same story prompt to work from to create their own story, but we have been doing a different system each time, this time being 13th Age. With Slavek, we're going to talk about 13th Age a little bit first. We'll be approaching it a little bit differently. Quinn and Tillman had notes set out ahead of time, but this time we're going to approach it more from a natural angle, just like talking it through after we learn more about the system. So I know we talked about this prior to recording a little bit, but can you go ahead and just give a good basic rundown of 13th Age?
All right, so think of 13th Age as a sort of indie D20 fantasy system.
Okay, so it's an indie version of
Yeah.
fantasy that we know.
If I were, I'd say it's more focused on like the story side than on like kill monsters, get loot, and move on, murder hobo your way through the world, whether you're good or evil.
Yeah. So like I understand with D&D the reason for murder hobo because that's how you get experience and that's how you level up. How do you actually level up and gain experience in 13th Age?
Whenever the game master says you do.
Oh, okay. So more the I know in 5th ed
milestones.
They introduced milestones. So okay, that's reasonable.
Yeah, the one thing that's very different is the way you recharge your daily spells and stuff, which you actually recharge every 4 battles. Can be less if some of those battles are harder, but it's usually like even if you spread it out through a month, then your characters won't be getting their stuff back, usually.
Oh, interesting. So it's not necessarily the time component per se, it's more just the battle. That's...
Yeah. Well, they did it mostly to fix stuff that 5e failed at, I think, with the sort of... I guess most people don't have time for 6 to 8 encounters per adventuring. That's just too long and too much.
Yeah, I mean, but combat takes a long time, I think, regardless of whatever system. And so to have to strong arm so many encounters, I get where they're coming from with that.
It's also a question of balance where, you don't want any players to feel bad about picking this class or that class. Whereas in 5e, if you play like a monk or something, which is like a short rest class, then you get completely screwed by the system often. Because people just don't short rest that often.
That's okay.
It's also a problem with warlocks. I think the main problem with warlocks.
To be honest, I haven't played enough to I have my certain classes that I like to play. So I'm like, oh, I wasn't aware of that. Makes sense given what I know about the system. Okay.
Yeah. One thing that's very different in 13th Age is the way mundane items are handled. And most of it is just hand waving. Like basic equipment like swords, armor, stuff like that. It's actually the property of the class, not of like the items themselves. Which means like a class could have daggers, and one of them could do d6 damage with them, and another would do d4.
Okay. To a degree that makes sense. If you take like a rogue who's been more trained, quote unquote, in that aspect of really close combat, it makes sense that they would cinematically know where to stab people better than a sorcerer who also has a dagger. And it's like, oh, there's somebody in my face and I can't cast a spell at them. So is that kind of the reasoning, you think?
Yeah, I think partially is because 13th Age doesn't want to be D&D. It tries to be more like, I don't want to say the world of darkness of D&D because that implies that there's like, it has to be some, I don't know, dark, gritty world, but it definitely has that storytelling focus and tries to put it front and center.
Gotcha. Okay.
and
Okay, very
simplifies the
cool.
other stuff so it doesn't take up that much time.
Right. Yeah, it's always interesting to see all these different systems trying to figure out how to balance the mechanics versus being able to tell a story within the mechanics.
Yeah, for sure. When I was running Inferno, I was actually having a lot of fun creating the mechanics for the demons that were possessing the players.
Slavek, you're such a nerd and I love it.
No, it was great because it's like, you know what? I can go completely off the wall with this because they're demons, and the things they did in that game were actually pretty tame, but they could have like leveled cities and stuff in the
Yeah.
requirements format.
I remember taking a look over what they could do, the demons and their abilities, and I was like, this is going to be a really interesting game. Oh, but that's so cool. And I feel like when I was reading your notes, like the way that you had things in which document was it?
I'm not sure if it's history or control. I don't know which one.
I'm looking at the 13th age document where you have all the icons and the technology,
Right.
main kingdoms, and like the way that you have that listed out, I'm like, I know this makes perfect sense to you and I'm intrigued by it, but I don't think I could ever list something out like that. So I'm like, how do you think like that? And how does that help you in telling a story?
It does and it doesn't. But what I like about stories is like when there's a very rich background to them, where even though I might not show it in this game, I might show it in another. And especially if I'm utilizing the same setting in different games, then I kind of want to have a fleshed out world. And
Absolutely.
need to ad-lib something, then I can just look at my list and say, hey, let's say these guys show up.
Oh gosh. So it's in a way, sorry if this is going to sound weird when I'm saying it. I'm just trying to like correlate the information. It's you're coming up with your own system with the story. The like, here's all the details, here's all the like kind of what's going on over here and over here and over there. And then when you get ready to get into the story and the fluff of whatnot, that's when those elements really shine.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
And it's also pretty good if you're running a sandbox game, then to really like create a living world where it changes even without the player's actions, where you kind of have it thought out. But that's like when you're going into high levels of, of playing, I guess. It's just getting really deep into it with a group.
Yeah. At my home table, the general feel is everybody wants a sandbox game, and my brain has a hard time wrapping around doing something like that. But
Yeah.
I think it's so cool that you have this. I'm like, I want to learn how to do that, man.
I usually write these things at work.
You're like, man, it comes naturally.
It's more like, I finished this press release and I'll do the rest of the stuff tomorrow. I hope my boss doesn't listen to this. But no.
Oh gosh.
I'm kidding. No, but honestly, it's really not that hard once you get started. You just have to keep writing. And I guess once you have a certain amount of experience or things that you want to do, you just flesh it out, which I guess in a way, the notes that I gave you are the pre-fleshed out version. They're just like notes for actual setting stuff.
Gotcha. So this is the notes that you currently have on that document is what is quote unquote canon.
Yeah, exactly.
So I know, again, we talked about this a little bit before recording, but I think it is worth reiterating. So like you have in, again, D&D, because it's so easy to relate the two, you have your Greyhawk system, you have your Forgotten Realms, Faerun, those sorts of settings that people can play their game in. And it sounds like 13th Age also has that, but how they approach it is different.
Yeah, 13th Age has, I think they call it the Dragon Empire. I actually have the map somewhere, but it's a pretty basic setting where you have like an important part of 13th Age are icons, which are 13 important people which essentially control the world And the way they influence the world is in fact so important that you have relationships with them. You don't have them with the people themselves, but at the beginning, at least, as low-level characters, but they represent relations with their respective organizations. Those can be positive, conflicted, or neutral. Negative, sorry. And so if you have a positive relationship and you get lucky in a session or story, then you can get help from the icon, and the players are encouraged to make up their own stories and their own items and basically think of what to introduce into the story. Right, so it's not just GM that's creating the world. The players are participating in that too, and that's really important in 13th Age.
Yeah, I want to say that in Control specifically, we had the opportunity to use a relationship and icon that way. I think it was Quinn's character who there's like an evil guy on the inside of this city that's being mind controlled, and we're like, hey, let's use a relationship to, figure out how to get inside. And so that's where that character came from.
Yeah, exactly.
So
and,
it's,
the more specific the player is, the better it is, in my opinion. Which, like, oh yeah, there's this guy, he's old, he has this grayish beard, or maybe he has one eye, but he seems very nice, but really he's a bit of an asshole, but I've known him for a long time, so we kind of get along. His name is blah blah blah. And I don't know, I think it's nice. It gives the players a more active role instead of a normal reactive role.
Right. So if players forget the NPCs that they've created, it's just like, really? Whereas, like, I expect that to happen in D&D, but in 13th Age, like, if you're the one creating them, then how can you be forgetting them?
Well, to be fair, I've forgotten more NPCs than I've made, probably, at this point.
Well, with how many games that you've been running, Forever GM, over the last 10 years, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. But I just remember those early games when I was just us young teens playing, and it was dumb, but it was fun.
Well, and that's, at the end of the day, that's what it's always supposed to be about, is, are we having fun?
Yeah, role-playing is an art.
Thank you for going there. I was like, I feel like I can get on a soapbox about that, but there's no reason. Let's just have fun. Let's just leave it at that.
No, it's just those classic arguments that sort of pop up.
I know. Okay, so with 13th Age, we have icons. I was surprised, again, having read the notes a little bit beforehand, that there's essentially deities. I was like, I had no idea about that while we were playing.
Sort of, kind of. But they're not important, or at least not in the official setting, because there's basically two sets of deities, the gods of light and gods of dark. The priestess, which is an icon, is like let's say, she speaks like to all the gods of light and sort of interprets their will and, I guess, does priestess things. And then there's the crusader, who serves the dark gods, who want a lot of things from their followers, but they give them a lot more power, but they're never really elaborated on. But it's kind of hinted that the crusader's kind of evil, and the only reason he's accepted in the empire is because he hunts demons more than he hurts the empire, really.
Oh gosh. I mean, hey, gotta keep your enemies close, right? Or closer.
I guess. It makes for a good story, especially if you have people from, like, let's say, priests with icon relationships from the priestess, and others with relationships from the crusader.
Yeah, because then it's not the good guys are all of one mind.
Yeah.
So it adds a little bit of intrigue into it, and which is, I think, essentially what you said. But
yeah. And part of the icon stuff that I really like is that it actually sort of ties the character into the world instantly.
Gotcha.
One thing you can ask is, why do you have this relationship? Like, how did it happen? What kind of events led to it? Maybe you were part of the army, so you have a relationship with the emperor, or you lived most of your life in the forest, so you have a relationship with the druid, or maybe it was an elven forest, so it's with the elven queen. Maybe both.
Okay. Things having played in a majority of your 13th age, I'm like, oh, things are starting to make sense as you're talking this out, because like you would prepare these characters for us so that we don't have to think too hard about a new system. Super appreciate that. But then like the input, especially over time, has gotten less and less from you, which I think is great, because then that allows us to go, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to say this about the character. And so that makes so much more sense now, because that's how it's supposed to be to begin with.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, one-shots are always different from actual campaigns where you have to sort of handhold the players a bit and guide them.
That's 100% fair.
So, yeah. Oh, one more thing about characters in 13th Age. They have this, it's not really a mechanic, but it's just called the one unique thing. So every character is unique from everyone else in the world with one thing. It can be anything. It can be, say, I'm the only human with 3 eyes. And then bam, you're the only human with 3 eyes.
Oh.
Stuff like that.
Okay.
It can be small things too. It can be like only person to roll a die 30 times in a row, get a 6.
So that would be an interesting, important fact about a character.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an important fact. It's a unique fact. And some people want to go crazy with it.
Mm-hmm.
And some people want to keep it more like grounded. And both are fine.
Gotcha.
But especially if you're playing want to play a high fantasy game where like everything seems magic, then you can really go crazy.
Okay. So I was just in the back of my mind, I was thinking about the icon relationships and kind of trying to equate that to, you mentioned like that's a way that people feel connected into the world to begin with. And my first instinct, because I've been thinking about Exalted Third Ed a lot, and they talk intimacies. You're always supposed to start, every character's supposed to start with at least 4 of those. And in a lot of ways, it's a different way to do the icons. But I was also thinking like, wait, but that's what the backgrounds in 5th Ed's supposed to also be like. So I'm just like, oh, it's interesting to have these different ways to approach how to socially connect characters. So you're not necessarily just doing these murder hobo things in these different systems, and how they approach it and how it gives you just a different feel to a game period.
Yeah, I agree. And, well, 5e gives those backgrounds, but usually once you have a background, you kind of forget about it. Gives you 2 skills, and who gives a damn?
Thank you. That is also how I feel about backgrounds.
But 13th Age actually does skills completely differently. So, you always...
Yes, it does.
You always add one of those stats, but you have backgrounds. You have backgrounds which replace skills. How many backgrounds points are there? I think there's 8 at the start. I can't remember right now. I always have to go through character creation. I usually create like batches of characters. Usually when I'm preparing a one-shot or something, then I create several characters.
Yeah, they all have been very interesting and unique.
And I usually remember how to do pretty much everything, but blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I think it's 8 though. Yeah, you get 8 at the beginning. Some class talents can change that, but essentially you pick stuff which is relatively has a pretty broad application, and you put points into that. You can have a maximum of 5 points in the background. So let's say you can be a gardener in the middle of a war, completely,
okay,
whatever. And then you sort of talk it out with your GM. What does this background actually mean? What it would apply to? Like, okay, so, maybe you were a gardener who was conscripted into a war, and then you went back to gardening. And so you'd have boosts when you'd use it when you look for information about plants growing, but also for like fighting, healing, medicine, stuff like that.
And I could even see like a social application for that as well, because
definitely.
Well, so you went off to war, now you're back. Well, maybe you are a gardener for one of the lords or one of the nobles in the city that you're in, and that in and of itself gives you a social network to work
definitely.
within. Okay.
There's other stuff that can be done, like let's say, magical thief, and or it can even be like specific, let's say, things that are tied to the story. So you can be a member of the Black Fang tribe, and then you'll talk with your GM of what the Black Fang tribe is, what they specialize in, and then the background would apply to that.
Okay. So is the idea that you're supposed to have this kind of fleshed out to begin with before you start play? Because I can see a player in the middle play going, okay, so I'm part of this tribe, and so I'm going to use that kind of as an excuse, like a flimsy excuse to be able to do something that doesn't necessarily make sense.
Well,
but because it fits within the story, or
if it makes sense within the story, and if the GM's okay with it, then it should be it's usually fine. Like, it can be a problem with certain types of players, but in my opinion, those players shouldn't be played with anyway. So,
okay, good to know.
Yeah, that's just how I see it. But I think it worked well in our group so far.
Yeah. What was it in our most recent one? I'm trying to remember the name of it.
Beginning of the End.
Thank you. Beginning of the End. I remember at one point you were asking us, hey, you guys need to do this. So figure out which skill and how to justify it. And we're like, oh, okay. Blah, 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 blah. Again, with it being a one shot, it makes sense that we're doing that stuff on the fly.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Is there anything else about 13th Age as a system that should be brought up at this point?
Well, it does stuff like AC a bit differently. Well, it works the same, you have to hit people, you have to match or exceed their AC, but the way you calculate your AC, you basically take the middle of, I think, Constitution, Dexterity, and Wisdom, and you take the middle modifier out of those three, and you add it to your class modifier. Each class has their own AC, same as with weapons. So they have different AC with light or heavy armor, and sometimes they have penalties for wearing heavy armor.
Okay, that makes sense.
Like rogue and heavy armor, I think, has like a -2 to attack or -4. I'm not sure. So it's kind of hard to do roguish moves when you're full plate.
Yeah, sitting around clunking.
Yeah. Although Craig would barge into here and it's like, oh, well, but full plate is actually like lighter than modern combat gear. Yada, yada, yada. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Do you?
Yeah, it is actually. I actually saw it was a really funny video. They had like this guy in full plate and a guy in full military gear, and they were.
Oh, I think I've seen that.
I don't know if they were running or they were climbing over walls and stuff. And the guy in knight armor actually finished first.
Right, because the idea is that it's more in the armor; it's more evenly balanced,
and it's not really as heavy either.
Gotcha. I mean, it makes sense. Doesn't need to be heavy. It just needs to protect you from arrows and
goblins,
swords, I guess. And goblins, the most important thing to protect yourself against.
Yeah, but otherwise, like combat system wise, the only thing is the escalation die, where
yes, oh my goodness, I love the escalation die.
The escalation die is a solution to slow combats.
Absolutely.
Basically, each turn after the first, the escalation die grows by 1, which means everyone gets plus, all the player characters get +1 to attack. It's actually a really good boss mechanic too, where you have a big creature and at certain numbers of the escalation die, you can have them do special moves and stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah.
And it also sort of actually, from a game system point, it gives incentives to the players to not use their strongest spells at first, like on the first turn.
Right, because the likelihood of you hitting, it's still possible, but it's a lot easier when you're a little bit further in combat.
Also helps solve a bit of the Nova 5e problem.
I don't know that problem.
It's basically where at the start of the fight, like everyone uses all their big stuff, all the smites, all the fireballs.
Okay, I see what you're
everything.
saying. Fireballs.
Fire.
Yep. Okay, that makes that makes sense. It gives it a different dynamic to
Obviously,
play with.
It's not a perfectly balanced game, but neither is 5e.
I mean, again, the point of it is at the end of the day, are we having fun? the answer is yes, then we're doing it
well,
right.
I, as a GM, always feel bad when it feels like one of the players isn't as involved because of the class they're playing or something like that. That's why I like balance.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. Yeah, I feel that's its own rabbit hole to go down in a different subject. So we now know a little bit more about 13th Age, and it's different. Like, I've been surprised throughout this whole conversation about how it's supposed to be run in a more long-term game, because we've just approached it with that one-shot mindset most of the times. It's definitely a system that I would like to explore more. But given that, so we know more, let's try to come up with a story based off of that prompt. So we have all this information with this world that you've built upon. Let's see how we can fit this prompt into it. So a local organization is accused of instigating arguments among people, seemingly natural disasters, and even wars.
Well, there actually is a really interesting organization. It's actually in one of the bestiaries. I'm not sure if it's in 1 or 2. It's called the Silver Hand, the Cult of the Silver Hand, and it's used by the Lich King. And it's a sort of cult that helps a certain village or whatever, helps their crops go and crops grow, make sure their farm animals are healthy, things like that. Basic stuff, They seem really nice and helpful. Of course, the catch is, where do they get the power to do that? So the way they do it is they siphon the life from like fields from other villages, and the health from animals from like other towns and stuff like that, other herds.
Okay.
And, the people don't know that. They're like, oh, yeah, these guys are pretty happy. And, the cult sort of indoctrinates them, makes them, let's say, sign contracts or whatever. Like, oh, yeah, after my body dies, you can resurrect it. Whatever. That's fine.
I'm not using it anymore.
Yeah. Stuff like that.
Okay.
And I really like it because it has this insidious nature of like, oh, yeah, there's this great healer from the Silver Hand. He'll help you. And then you realize he, killed someone to heal your friend.
Oh my goodness.
Fatally wounded or something similar. And
I'm making connections.
I really like these small scale cults where there's not actually that much on the line.
But I mean, there can be, if left unchecked, a group like that could accumulate quite a bit of power.
Exactly.
So, I mean, if you are thinking about this from starting a campaign, maybe it's not the first focus by any means, but it could be something that you drop in the background. Okay, you guys go to this village to, say you're slaying a dragon. You're going on your quest. You come across a village that's doing really well, very prosperous. It almost doesn't make sense, like giving those hints without necessarily saying it. And then they continue on their way. And then maybe somewhere else down the line, they find a place that's just so opposite to that first village, giving the players the opportunity to maybe put 2 and 2 together, or at least try to theorize what's going on with that.
Yeah, definitely. Or maybe they can find some medallions or whatever when they're, if they're looking into it, someone might actually ask them to.
Yeah, as they're going through.
Yeah, because they might actually be of rival villages or whatever. And so suddenly the fates have changed, the horrible village is now the prosperous village, and the prosperous village fell on hard times. But no one knows why. They know their crops are dying, their animals are dying, people disappearing.
So the village that was prospering and now things are going into, if you just want to plop the players right into it, say they're hired by the village mayor or chieftain or whatever you want to, whatever society you're dropping them in, and the players are asked to investigate more into it. So with a story like that,
you can even complicate it by making it seem, like the people who are kind of whose village is kind of going down together are just kind of rude, and maybe even seem like the bad guys to the players, because these guys they're just jealous of this other village, and the other village, all the people there are so nice and they all want to help us and whatever. And maybe they'll talk about that the other village hired them to that village, and it can get super complex. And then they found out they actually were helping the bad guys all along.
I mean, and that could be definitely a very interesting approach to take into it. So with that last line, you said they find out that they're helping the bad guys all along. Like, how would you get started? The player started on a route like that.
You definitely have to go small and maybe with a little lie say that, oh yeah, this other village stole something important from us, and it could be a artifact that protects the village from the undead cult.
Oh my goodness! So once the item's taken away, it's even worse.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. That's cool.
Yeah, that's evil.
Okay. I mean, yeah, but that gives it a I feel like we've already talked about like 2 or 3 different ways that you could have that instigating event. And it's like the first couple ones we talked about was okay, that's pretty typical. I feel like general fantasy kind of tropes. But with this last one, I was like, oh, I wouldn't have thought of that as a storyteller per se. So I like the twist.
Yeah, for sure. And then you'll go further. You could go further with it by sending them to another village and saying that they stole this herd of cattle or something, and to get it back. And then just keep escalating it and making it worse and worse for the players.
Oh my gosh. Because I think the interesting way to deal with that is maybe the players don't go back and see until later the devastation that they're actually causing. Because again, you mentioned this first village as being really kind and really nice and put on that maybe that victimized hat, like, oh, all these other villages are being really mean to us. Can you go get our artifact, our herd, our, hey, this other village put up a dam that prevents us from getting water. Would you put like somebody from the cult in that first village who maybe the players are actually talking to, or?
Yeah, that's actually a great idea. I was thinking of like, how does the cult expand, right? They can't just stay with one village. Then they'd go to the ruined village and tell them they'd help them, and then spread that misery to other villages that neighbor the other village.
Okay. So they're slowly
work. Yeah, exactly. Slowly encroaching on that territory. And there's a reason for that. It's because in the default setting of the Dragon Empire, the Lich King used to be called the Wizard King, and he used to actually rule the empire, and he wants to get it back. He's currently stuck on like an island.
So in the story that we're currently talking about, where the Silver Hand is trying to consolidate power for the, you said the Lich King?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So from a setting point, I'm trying to think, like, at what point is enough power for the Lich King to be able to come back?
Well, from a purely GM perspective, I would say the Silver Hand isn't really going to be that big of a deal because the PCs are going to come and solve it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Or deal with it because they're just, in my opinion, they're like a low-level threat. But if we were playing Sandbox, then you could just slowly think of the map as sort of graying out all these undead areas.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if the Silverhand, it's been a long time since I actually read the entry, but I think they also use the undead as like labor in the fields. So they actually make things a lot easier for the people there, living ones.
Yeah. Makes it easier for them. But depending on where the players land on a moral spectrum and like the icons that they have relationships with, I'm assuming that just seeing a field of undead could be highly frowned upon.
Yeah, definitely. It depends on, there's actually a necromancer class in the setting, but there's like, you can play an evil necromancer or there's like a redeemer necromancer type.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, because there's a bunch of the talents for each class, and the way you create a character, you pick a couple of those talents and put them together. So each character can be a bit different. It's kind of like instead of choosing subclasses, you choose talents. Usually pick 3 at character creation.
Okay. So it sounds like it could be not as big of a deal to see zombies in a field working the field. So that's not necessarily a red flag per se.
Yeah, it depends on who and why and what the magic was that animated them, I guess.
Okay. Okay.
Or it
Oh,
could be
nice.
just your necromancer in your party is jealous and wants to destroy them.
Hey, that's a fair point too. So kind of going back to the idea that the silvered hand is small scale. So maybe the first several levels the players are dealing with how to stop this cult from graying out the map. I can see like a general confrontation with the head cult person, but then once that part of the story is done, thinking more of a long-term game, where would you take that from there?
Well, I guess I would see how they solved it first, and then I work up from there. Maybe introduce another icon into the conflict. Although, like, probably during the first story, there'd be like several organizations that are involved, maybe on a low level scale. Maybe the Legion of the Empire gets called, or something like that. Or maybe someone from a wizarding academy wants to study the phenomena. But once you go up, sure, there's a head cult person, but there has to be a person that actually manages, and I say person very loosely here, that manages this cult and tells them what to do, right? So it could be like a high-ranking lich or like a death knight or whatever, some maybe a reoccurring NPC or an enemy that they'd have to face, let's say almost near the end. So at that point, the character could definitely crush them if it found them, but the NPCs would sort of learn about them, and then I'd put it into their hands. Like, what do you want to do? How do you want to run this? How do you want to fight this?
Gotcha. I like that, having it makes sense that the cult wouldn't actually have necessarily a direct connection to the lich, but that they're really just a pawn in a
Yeah,
bigger game.
kind of a pyramid scheme.
Exactly. So, which as I think about it, I'm like, oh, that makes perfect sense to have something like that. But I'm like, how do you even get to that point of figuring that out? I'm just saying I'm really impressed with this game, and now I want to play it.
Well, I mean, Chris did say we should have a 13th age game where everyone has a character. So
That yeah. I until I hear that from you, I'm gonna be like, okay, I'll wait for it. Gosh. So we have this cult, then we have a lieutenant, or however close you want them to be to the Lich King, and however many steps between then and there. But I feel like this gives a really good, solid story where there's definitely more that we can sit here and flesh out, but that should be enough of a bare bones to get a game going.
And I think definitely that's where having a fleshed out setting works well. When you have a sandbox like that, it's because the players will probably ask questions. Well, maybe I have this icon, so maybe I have some contacts here and here, and it just kind of works out.
Right. And talking
It
about
basically presents the options available without actually having to say A, B, C. It's like, look at this. This is what's happening in the world. Now go and do stuff.
So talking from that perspective, you can run this game a couple of different times, and depending on the icons that the players have, because those are the parties that I assume you as the storyteller would bring in to it, and how those different icons would interact with this one particular icon is going to be different every time. So it changes the face of the game.
You can even change the icon of the silvered hand if you want to.
That's
You can
absolutely
change it from the Lich King to the Diabolist, or maybe the Crusader.
Ooh,
Maybe it's a way for him to
that good
recruit more
guy.
people. Yeah. I mean, he always needs people to fight demons.
If you change that aspect of it, like who the ultimate bad guy is, then what do you do with the cult at that point? Because in the way that we've set it up, they're gathering the energy from the land from other places to make these places more powerful. So how would you change it for a different icon type?
I think for stuff like the Crusader and the Diabolist, who are known to use dark magic, you could keep it as is. It'd be more difficult with stuff like the Orc Lord, where you really have to sort of scratch your head a bit. But I think it'd be possible too, with it being sort of, at first it would look like very nice, like the Orc Lord has taken all these villages and they were terribly bad on they had terrible luck with their crops and everything. So he sent orcs and goblins there, and they live peacefully there. But then the players would slowly come to the realization that maybe people that are living in the villages are actually used as slaves to farm food for the York Lord's army or stuff like that. And whenever the players actually come, they quickly set it up so it doesn't seem that way. Maybe they have a way to spy on them.
Gotcha. Okay.
At that point, you have to significantly change the cult if it's like a different type of icon.
Right. But there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, it's just reflavouring all that stuff.
Absolutely.
Which 13th Age does a lot. It often has like bestiary entries, and it's like, this is how this monster would act under this icon. This is how it would act under this icon. And this is where it would be under this icon. And this includes like stuff like adventures and one-shots.
Interesting. So I remember you talking about going into that a little bit, where the you mentioned the stat blocks for monsters is pretty simple. Mm-hmm. So if monsters can also have different icons, does that change the type of monster that they are?
The type of monster usually stays the same. An ogre's still an ogre, but you might give them a different ability. Maybe change the damage type from like fire to, I don't know all the damage types in 13th Age actually, but to something like lightning. If it's like an ogre, which was currently, let's say, bound by the wizard, by the archmage, and so yeah, sure, let's give him some glowing blue tattoos and a lightning club. Why not?
Gotcha. So it could be as simple as just really a cosmetic change and
I mean, it's
damage type.
Unless the players are going to be playing through different games of what is essentially the same thing and reflavor it, then it doesn't really matter.
Okay. I like that. It just allows for the flexibility of seeing how your players interact with the world, and then you can make things more difficult because is there like elemental weaknesses within 13th Age?
There are vulnerabilities. I think I remember that they make critting them easier with those elements.
Gotcha. Okay.
I know the way resistances work is that either you, on your natural roll to attack, you either have to roll that number or higher. Otherwise, it does half damage. So say you had resistance to fire 16 plus, then you have to roll a 16 plus when you actually attack. Otherwise, it does half damage if you hit.
Okay. I think I understand that.
It's really not that complicated. It's just, you just have to roll more than the number says. Otherwise, half damage. Okay.
That's pretty gosh darn simple right there. Again, another reason why it's so nice to just be able to jump into 13th Age. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think I've ever ran a one-shot of 13th Age where people had problems with the combat rules.
I mean, they're pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any other thoughts about 13th Age that you'd like to incorporate real quick? Or
yes, you should play it. If you're listening to this, play 13th Age. Please.
Well, there you go. There you go. And definitely check it out. Do they have a lot of their resources?
They have an SRD. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They have an SRD, so a lot of it's accessible legally online.
That's nice. So I'm assuming it's
Yeah, just Google the 13th Age SRD and you'll find it.
So they have the system that's up for free, but a
lot of the
like any setting stuff.
And a lot of the extra stuff is like in the books. But yeah, I think it's really cool the way they did it. And also just because referencing books all the time, even though it's a relatively simple system, would be annoying. I always like things when they're online on a web page. And
Control F is the best friend of the GM. So it is, I agree with you, to just be able to have a whole SRD and just be like, I don't want to spend 2 minutes trying to find this one thing when I can just type it into a search and have the page come up. That's good. I'm glad. I feel like I knew that, but it's good to reiterate that they have the SRD. Yeah, definitely, people. If you're listening to this, you should go check out 13th Age.
Yep. Check out 13th Age, play 13th Age, read 13th Age. Forget about 5e.
and then if you do go through all of that, share that with us. Like I want to know what your guys' thoughts are on 13th Ages, and do you like it more than typical Dungeons and Dragons or not, or whatever? Just your thoughts in general. I'm curious. I think Slavek is too.
Yeah, always.
Thank you so much for coming and telling us about 13th Age, and then coming up with a nice little story for people to play with. I really enjoyed learning more about 13th Age, even though I've played it a little bit before. I'm like, oh, I'm still learning stuff. That's nice.
This is not an ad, by the way. We're not getting paid for this.
Oh yeah, no, not at all. All right. Thank you everyone so much for joining us. We'll see you in the next one. Interested in gods, powerful players, and lots of laughs? Then check out Scion, the Valley of the Setting Sun. Our heroes have just come into their powers and must navigate the tangled roots of the Scion community. Will they achieve their destiny, or will their bones be left to dry under the sun?